Thank you. Thanks for having me.
As we have already shortly discussed, you have some experience in entrepreneurship and artificial intelligence. So I think we are going to learn a lot about that. But before we dive a little bit deeper, can you tell us a bit about your background, who you are, and what a Founder Scout is?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, thanks already for the intro that you did. Let me tell you a bit about myself. So I'm Daniela, as you already mentioned. I'm originally from Colombia, so I'm from South America, and I moved here around 3.5 years ago. Before I moved, I was a founder myself. So back in Colombia, I started three different companies in different spaces. So one in the B2B SaaS space, one was a marketplace, and the other one was in the food sector. Out of passion, out of a problem solving, vision and an ability that I think I have. And I've always really been passionate about entrepreneurship and what it really means to be a founder and just go and execute things and figure out your plan also while you're working on it and then while you're doing it. Um, that passion, that interest along my journey, to not make it super long, brought me to the Netherlands. I did my studies, as you said, in entrepreneurship as well, to learn a bit more about the ecosystem here, to get my network and to figure out how things were being done on this side of the world. Let's put it like that. And let's say I also try to be in a different side of that table of entrepreneurship. So I had wore my entrepreneurial hat from a founder perspective, but I also wanted to know how the other side of the table looked like, right? From a program manager perspective. So I run an incubation program at an incubator called ACE before I joined Slimmer. And I also learned a lot from more of a science and tech perspective. So a lot of deep tech startups and founders that were more technical. I'm more of a business person in that sense, and I would bring that support from that entrepreneurship business driven mindset. And then, of course, now joining Slimmer, so that was last year in the summer of 2022. I started working as a founder scout or talent scout, as you mentioned, and it really has to do with finding the right talent, finding the right fit. I mean, we do believe, and I do believe myself, that entrepreneurship is something that everyone can do, but there are different types of entrepreneurship depending on the skill set, the ambition, the vision, and then what this individual would want to make from it. So as a founder scout, what I do is I look for that people. I look for those aspiring entrepreneurs that want to be building something, especially in the B2B SaaS space where AI can bring a competitive advantage, and we'll talk about that also in a bit. But it's not only about finding them and seeing if there's a fit. It's also about building teams, because as you know, of course, when we're talking about entrepreneurship, it's also a lot about the team that's going to be behind executing a plan, a vision, an idea that they have. And there needs to be a complementary skill set from both, the soft and the hard skills. And that's also something that I do within my role. So also trying to connect the dots and connect the people to make this a success. And that's a bit of what I do as a talent scout as well as Slimmer.
Before elaborating more on what a talent scout is and how you're scouting all those companies and aspiring talents, is the entrepreneurial part in you something that you've always naturally had, or is that something you developed when you grew and when you discovered what was possible?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what we call entrepreneurship, right? Like, what is it that we're talking about? I think from a young age, I've always really liked the business side of things. Like, there's a problem, if there's an opportunity, just going for it, figuring out how to solve for it. And if there's some other people that are interested in joining to solve the problem or have the problem and you're solving it for them, right? So when I was a kid, at some point, I would like to sell things or just figure out, like people are buying this and I could get it at this price and then try to do something about it. So I was lucky enough to have an idea of this business world, I don't know, from a young age. But I've definitely developed into it. So it was something that I was curious about, that I was learning about, that I always had, curiosity about, and went for it, and kept on building onto that based on that entrepreneurial journey as a founder, based on that as journey also from a university perspective, if you wish, and from that practical side. So a bit of both, I would say.
Ah, really interesting. Yeah, I believe it's something you can develop, but there's also a natural part to it, and natural curiosity as how things are operating. And like you already mentioned, like the examples, why is product interesting to someone? Why is someone willing to pay a particular amount to it? So yeah, I can recognize that. If you're then looking at to what you're doing at Slimmer AI, you said you are discovering and kind of scouting founders. If I look at the football world, then we would usually go to some football matches to look at particular traits, like how fast someone can run, how hard he can shoot, perhaps his conditioning, his cardio, how his strength. What are the ingredients you are looking at to scout entrepreneurs or founders?
Yeah, I love this question because I think when we're talking about entrepreneurs and about founders, there's a mix of different things, right? Like, and also we're talking about teams. So at some point, if you don't get exactly everything within the mix of one person, which I believe it's going to be always the case, then you have somebody else to complement, right? But what we're looking for in general, it has to do with that grit, that determination of someone, hey, I want to change something. I want to create impact. I want to go the extra mile, and that's something that we really need to be connected with the founder. Like, why are you doing this? So, because I mean, everyone talks about entrepreneurship and the nice things about it, but it's also a lonely journey. It's also full of challenges, and you have to deal with them. So, what's really that motivation, that drive? That's behind, that's gonna help you, wake up every day and want to keep on pushing and want to keep on going forward, right? That resilience part. And with this being said, it also has to do with the self-awareness that the entrepreneur has or the aspiring founder. So you need to know what you're good at, what gives you energy, but what are also those things where you need to learn a bit more about, or you maybe don't really want to be spending your time on, because that's also part of that building team and understanding like how to work together. And it has to do also with empathy. It's also about, okay, how are you going to be dealing with this stress? How are you going to be working out with other people? How are you going to bring the best out of others? And if you wish on top of that, it's also about leadership. It's also about influencing ability, but those are things also that you can coach, right? So it's really starting from the ground into why is this person intrinsically motivated to do this? Let's put it like that. And then of course there are other things that you can really support them in that journey and complement them.
Just to interject there, if I have to
Yes.
translate what kind of skills there are in what you just said, there is largely a human part like resilience, leadership, empathy. But yeah, this podcast is called the AI dilemma, and I love to address some dilemmas. If you would scout. If you would encounter a situation and you have someone on the one side, very technical, brilliant, smart, intelligent guy, can program, build everything, or there would be someone who is not necessarily so technical, but is great in people skills, soft skills. What kind of profile would you prefer and why?
I would have them both. I would make a team. So I think what's interesting here, and indeed going back to your question, it's also what are you looking for, right? Because as I said at the beginning, it's really dependent on what are you optimizing for, and sometimes you won't find all the skills within one person, but it will be, for example, and to go a bit more to the technicalities. Normally, what we look for is a founder that understands the problem that he or she wants to solve for, right? They need to have the domain expertise. And what we do at Slimmer, and now to connect it also or to bring it back to the AI component, is how can we, as experts in the AI field, support this person into solving that problem from a technology perspective? Because not everyone would know about what's the right tech or what's the right technology or what's the right approach to solving this problem, again, from a technical perspective. But if they have an understanding into what's the job to be done and what the problem is, we can make sure to support them into that journey. And that's also where Slimmer and where this connection goes from a founder to founders joining our founder in residence program at Slimmer AI.
Yes, yes, yes. And to take a step back about Slimmer AI, because I already noticed you're supporting, you have some technical capabilities. Can you also tell a bit about the history of Slimmer AI, how it emerged, what has happened since then, and how they got here and you got here?
Definitely, definitely. So Slimmer AI, it's currently a venture studio. We support founders that want to create a company or a startup in the B2B SaaS space with a strong AI component, and we'll get to there in a bit. But how we got to this phase, it goes back to quite some years, more than 10 years ago. It was not called Slimmer AI, but actually the organization was a project-based company doing project-based on AI pretty much. So the AI has always been there with us and that component. But then what we figured out at some point when there was a pivot, I was along around 3 years ago, so somewhere along 2019, 2020, it was like, hey, we have this really, really interesting talent, right? We know how to build tech. We know about AI. We see the trends that are coming also in the market. How else could we bring value literally to use this? And that's when the first pivot happened and Slimmer AI as the brand and the name came into place, but it was really to create products. So we're like, hey, we know how to build products. We're really good with AI. Let's see what challenges are out there in the startup ecosystem, the tech ecosystem, and let's build products to solve them. That was pretty much the idea, and that's how the first company that we created started, Sentinels. Back then, with the idea of it being a product. What happened? It was that, I mean, the product was so well received, and maybe to give some context, this is in the anti-money laundering space. So it was a product to really flag these type of transactions. The first customer was actually Molly, and back then it was quite a good fit for what they were needing actually to also scale. And what happened is that this product, as we thought, Sentinels, became even bigger than what we expected and what we imagined. So at that point, it was, okay, how are we going to keep up building this type of products when they actually look like they're going to be a company on its own? And that's when the next pivot took place. And we thought, hey, we can actually partner up with the founders that really understand their spaces because we're generalists. We know about AI. That doesn't mean that we know about all the specific sectors where you can actually apply it. But what if the founders bring that expertise from those spaces and we bring our know-how into building a company in the B2B SaaS space and also that AI component as a long-term competitive advantage for the product that we end up building together? That's pretty much of how we went from a project-based to a product-based to a venture-based or venture studio model right now.
That sounds kind of like accelerator, if you're familiar with that. I think there's different models. Would you also consider what you are doing the same as, not an accelerator, incubator kind of model, or is that something distinctly different?
Yeah, good question. So I think it always depends on what attributes do you give to each one of these programs, right? Or processes. So how we see it is when we build companies with founders, we do it in a holistic way. So it comes with different factors and it's very hands-on. So the main or one of the differences as well, it's we don't work with cohorts, for example. So we work really one-on-one. So for example, on a yearly basis, we build up to 2 or 3 companies. So we're talking about a different type of support and intensity of that support. But we work from day zero and from scratch. So in that sense, it's similar to what you said. Well, they also do that at the beginning. And what we do from this holistic view is we sit down with the founders, we analyze what's the idea, what's the problem they're trying to solve. And we look for, okay, how do we make this business and this idea a VC backable, let's say a startup and business. And in that sense, it comes with different building blocks. So from a company strategy perspective, from a product AI vision strategy as well, from the product itself. And then when I'm talking the product, I'm also talking developing, like writing the code and putting the AI also into it, as well as the marketing, the sales, the talent, hiring people, and making sure, of course, we support the founders in the financial legal matters that comes with running a company. Of course, also when the fundraising come, we're also there hands-on with the founders working to make this work. So we play a role of an early stage co-founder as well at the beginning, and also with pretty much hands-on support when it comes to the technical part of the product building.
I see. And is your involvement then just at the front end of discovering, exploring, and getting founders in, and afterwards the rest of Slimmer AI supports them throughout that process, or is that also during the different stages where your work is involved?
Yeah, so it really depends because every case, let's say, is different. But in general, I'm mostly involved at the beginning. So, of course, when we bring the founders in and when we support them into building this team. And then, of course, when we go more in depth, there's other people within Slimmer AI that are going to be supporting them. But when it comes to team building and support from a founder perspective, then I can also be of help. It might be that they're a bit longer in the journey, but they might need someone else to join them. So I could also jump in. But mostly at the beginning of that journey.
Okay, so let's just conceptually say I was an entrepreneur. I've been building some AI product for a couple of months. Yeah, also maybe in the anti-money laundering scene, and we would have our first discovery call. What are we looking at then? And what I mean more specifically, you already mentioned the capabilities, but I'm interested in how do you determine the objectives? Like, if we are going to work together, what are we going to work towards? Are we going to work towards a specific product at the end of a couple of months in a roadmap, or are we talking about a particular exit that we are looking for? Because I think companies are also exiting, and Slimmer AI has also been successful in that. What kind of goals are we looking at?
Great question. We're looking about, let's say, to work towards the long-term successful business. And that's how we like to see it, because exits, as you said, they had happened before, but it depends on the opportunity, right? We're not going to be pushing for an exit if the founder doesn't want that. And if the founder wants to take an exit and they believe it's the best option, we will go for that as well. So in that sense, what we think from the beginning conceptually is what's the roadmap, right? Where are we going with this startup, and what's the long-term vision? Because then with that in mind, we can build from the beginning for scalability. So also, for example, when we think about the AI roadmap, if you wish, we don't believe in building AI just because we want to throw AI at everything. That's not how we do things, but it's really about what is and how can we use the best of AI to improve the way people work and to put it within a roadmap where it makes sense. At the beginning, we might be talking about the use of data, for example, and we might be talking about how are we going to implement feedback loops, so that then when the AI component plays a role and a relevant one, we're going to be using it. So that doesn't mean that from day zero we need to use AI. Sometimes we do. But sometimes you might say, well, it doesn't really make sense to start now, but with this roadmap in mind, the AI part or component makes sense at this stage in the journey. And that's pretty much how we also articulate and prepare that plan or roadmap towards what we're building for. And it comes also from an understanding of where the founder wants to go, right? Like, what's the vision for that company, and how are we going to be solving this problem, and how are we going to also expand? Because at the beginning, of course, you focus on a specific job to be done, an area, but then of course you can also learn about the possibilities also that AI can bring into expanding that vision into a bigger one, and one where that competitive advantage will be more difficult to break, because of course you also have that technology from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned that I really like that you're not necessarily going to throw in AI for the sake of throwing in. It needs to add specific value. Can you give an example of where there was like a product or an idea and where AI was really distinctly valuable to integrate in it?
Yeah, definitely. So let's say the latest startup that we built, it's called Uncover. So it's in the legal tech space. Two lawyers, what they figured out is there was a lot of paperwork, as you can imagine, within their workflow. So, I mean, what they were into and what they really, really enjoyed doing was preparing to win a case, right? But before you can do that, you need to go through the paperwork. They needed to do a lot of manual work, from just getting documentation and then creating, like an Excel file and putting all this information somewhere, and then they could prepare to win the case, right? So then they were like, okay, they were non-technicals themselves, but they really understood the problem, and they were trying to figure out, okay, how can we solve for this, right? Where do we find this also person that understands what the technology's capabilities are, and can build something with us? And that's actually how we got in contact with them, and the type of discussion we started having back then. And that's a case where actually the AI component became really, really relevant from the beginning. So really to be able to use AI or NLP, if you wish, at the beginning to just scan through all these documents, put it on a dashboard, have a visual, let's say, a dashboard where you can just analyze, see the information, and just prepare for your case without having to go through the whole hustle of manually going through this documentation, uploading it somewhere, writing data, and then going towards that. So this is a case where it became super interesting and relevant from the beginning.
Really interesting. It definitely simplifies and accelerates a lot in the process you illustrated. What is the most fun about this game, if you will, and what's the toughest part?
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me personally, I really enjoy connecting with founders, just getting to know a bit more what they're doing, what they need to do, and how can we help them, right? And I think from a slimmer AI perspective as well, we're all motivated towards really using AI where it really matters and where it can really bring an impact. So we really think in terms of how can we improve the way people work, right? And how can we allow people to do meaningful work, and of course take out maybe those repetitive tasks or things that are not that meaningful. And I think that's where the fun part is, as an organization, and also for me as an individual, being part of it.
Maybe a question, because of course that's where
Yes.
you add the value. Where do you see that most time is wasted if entrepreneurs are coming in initially? Because I can imagine you're having an interaction or a review and you're like, wow, this is going great, but actually this can be accelerated 10x. You can do it this or this or this way.
In which sense do you mean? Within my process, or
No, no. When there is, for example, a specific team that's working on a product, and then you are
Mhm.
doing some kind of discovery or deep dive in as to how things are going, and then you find like, hey, this process can be accelerated. This is a little bit inefficient. Are there things you see coming back, like some patterns there?
Yeah, I think, let's say that's something that we do normally with when we do dive deeps, as you said, on a product level. So what's really the funnel, and what's happening. So in that sense, I think in general, in different markets that we see, or when we talk to founders and try to understand what they're doing, there's a lot of opportunity to, let's say, streamline workflows in general. So when it comes to, hey, I have this information that I read here, and then I have to send it to this other, let's say, dashboard, or to this other, I don't know, tool. And then I need to communicate to another person, and they look from this. Or right now, the insights, there's a platform that gives me some information, but then it's a lot of, like manual work to get it from there, and then kind of prepare some presentation about it. So there's a lot of different interesting fields, and I'm being very general here because depending on the area or the space, it might be quite different. So one where we see a lot of interesting space has to do with healthcare, and how healthcare, and for example, general practitioners or doctors are dealing with treating patients. And there's a lot of room of opportunity to actually improve that workflow that they currently have, with some of the AI technology that we can use. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
quite broad, but that's one that we
Yeah, and
find quite
of
interesting.
course, every situation is specific, so I can absolutely understand that. And I also interject you before you want to answer the second part of the question about the toughest components of the process. Or what are we looking at there?
Yeah, it's always interesting because, I mean, the type of opportunities and the type of work that we do, it's very specific, right? As I said, it's very personalized, the approach that we have, and there needs to be a fit, and there needs to be a fit in different components. How we like to see it, it has to do with the founder and the founding team, as I explained. There's also the space, the area where they are in, and it's also slimmer AI as part of the picture, right? And the toughest part, but it's also, it's exciting also in a way. I won't tell you it's like bad or anything, but it's really finding that right fit, and nailing that mix in between the founder and the space that they're in, and having that right to play as a founder in a space that you're knowledgeable about, and then also seeing or finding that fit with what Slimmer AI is bringing and the stage that they come to us, and finding that kind of serendipity, if you wish, when these three spaces come within, because it's also from the founder side a difficult decision to make. They also need to, let's say, get to know us, and see if what Slimmer AI can bring is something that they actually are aligned with, and all of this needs to come together. So I think that's one of the challenge, but in a good way. I think it's a good challenge that we face, and that's what we're looking for the right fit, as well.
And let's say we have a pathway. Like here you have ideation, and here you have like build. We have finally built the product, and when to market. And in that, there is different in between stations. For me personally, I would think entirely in the beginning, that would be the most difficult, because one, you don't know if the product will be built in a way that is received positively by your end customer or your target group. But secondly, you also have, I think, some initial investment capital, and you need to explore if that is fit. There's a lot of insecurities. I think the insecurity part will be the toughest, and that also translates into perhaps the one of the ingredients for entrepreneurs, that you need to have some insecurity tolerance, if you will. Is that something that you recognize, or do you actually see completely the opposite, like at the end when you go to market, that's the most difficult part?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it really depends on how you deal with every stage. Because, for example, something that we always encourage and we always discuss openly with founders that we work with is that we're not going to be building until we know what we're building and what we need to build, right? So when we're talking about this ideation, it's and the validation phase, especially at the beginning, we need to find together with the founders a design partner, as we call it, or a launching customer, if you wish, because once we start writing codes, we want to have the direct feedback of a user saying, well, this is what I'm looking for, or no, actually, that's not what I intended, or like this is not solving the problem that I expected.
How is that
Because
happening? Is that like putting out a prototype to a specific target group and let them play around and receive feedback, or how does that happen?
Yeah, good question. So normally at the ideation phase, like really early, we could have some prototype and something just to get feedback in general from people, from the conversations that the founders are having with the relevant parties. But when we're going to be building, and really I'm talking now MVP and writing the code, it really has to be with a dedicated partner. So I'm talking someone that it's within the group, of course, of the ideal customer, someone that they might be paying, they might not be. So it really depends, of course, on what the interest is and what that long-term plan from a founding perspective also looks like. But it's a customer that really, let's say, validate that there's a need for this. They're interested. They're going to allocate their time and maybe some money as well to this. And they're willing to give feedback and just say, well, now we're doing the first version, right? Like now we're going to be doing XYZ, and then you give it to them and they tried it and they used it and they say, well, XY is good, but Z, I'm not so sure. Or actually, I expected Z to be first, then XY, right? And it's really, really a conversation that goes really hands-on, and that the founder really needs to lead as well. And that's also when you communicate also to your team, and also from a product building perspective, like what is that problem? What are we trying to solve? And then translate that into what are the features then that we're building for. So we work from that idea from a let's understand first the problem. This problem and insights are then going to guide our product, let's say, development and delivery of it, and also prioritization, if you wish, of the features that it's going to have. So that's how we see that part going on.
Really interesting. So that's the product part, but we live in, I think, the attention economy. So let's say you have a great product. How important is marketing in this story? Because sometimes you see products that just have some great marketing strategies and receive a lot of attention. And then when you look into the product, it's actually not so really special. And then on the other hand, you have very beautiful products, but you discover them after a couple of years because they didn't do anything about marketing. What do you see there?
Yeah, definitely. And we see this, and let me go back to what I said, that we build companies in a holistic way. And one of the things, it's not only the product, but it has to do with marketing and sales. Because you might have, as you said, an amazing product, but if you don't have the right strategy or sales channel or funnel developed, then you might as well don't build the product anyway if you're not going to go for it. So and it also happens the other way around, but we believe in actually having a great product that also has a great marketing and sales channel. So we decided to focus also on the B2B space. It also comes with different challenges than if we'll be talking about, let's say, B2C. It's also about the sales cycle. It's also about how do you, let's say, engage with your user? Like, how are you going to be selling this also for the long term? Like, how are you going to keep those relationships? How are you going to onboard people also to use this platform? And when we're talking about this is also linked to your company vision and strategy, because if this is something that requires, I don't know, like a heavy time investment when it comes to onboarding, then of course it cannot be such a scalable company, or let's say as bigger of a vision as one that maybe requires less time involved at the beginning. And that's also something that we want to be very hands-on from the beginning with the founders, because we need to understand, learn how these cycles work, build that funnel, and also understand what the customer needs, what they're willing to pay for this in order to have that successful sales and marketing strategy. So that's definitely something that comes together and hand in hand with developing that product.
Yeah, I think really valuable insights. Are these things that you often see that have been overlooked, or do you usually see like they have addressed this in large part these questions? Because I can imagine it's very easy to lose yourself completely in the product and the benefits and the value add, but then when you look at the underlying sales parts, then you're like, oh, I hadn't really considered that.
Exactly, and I think, at least again, going back to how we like to see the venture building, it's really a whole system that works together. You cannot just think, oh, this is my product and this is just what I do, but it's really, how does this connect to then this whole company and this whole strategy, right? And that's also where the team becomes really important. And who is taking ownership of what? And at the beginning, we believe sales is done by everyone in the organization, because selling is not just like, oh yeah, here's a product, take it, this is what we charge. It's really understanding a need. It's really satisfying that need, and then finding a way to support that user, right? Like, how can we make this better for them? So we also believe at the beginning, especially at the beginning, this product person, it's also the one that starts doing sales, because they're the ones that really understand what the problem is, what the product is going to be doing, and how this connects. And then, of course, as the company grows, I mean, the product person, it's more involved, of course, in that development of the product, but that also comes from insights from the users. And then there's also someone that, again, could be the same person, it could be a different one, that think about sales from a bigger, like expansion perspective as well. How are we going to scale this? How do we open other markets? How are we going to build these funnels going forward? So there's definitely a mix and an overlap, especially at the beginning, between product and sales. And we think going forward, it's always going to be intertwined to have a successful venture for sure.
A lot of ingredients, obviously. What I see. What are red flags that you sometimes notice where you're like, oh, this was nice, but after 6 months, you're starting to detect some challenges there. Can you mention a couple? Do you see some things coming back?
Could you elaborate like a bit on the product side perspective, or like
Uh,
mistakes in
uh,
general that we see, or?
Yeah, just widely, indeed. Perhaps on the product, you see some stuff going on, or perhaps within team dynamics that someone went a different direction.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know, just generically.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, and I think there's different things that we spot or that we see, and I think one that's really painful, it has to do with developing a product before you are talking with the users, or non-talking with the users at all, because sometimes people are like, oh yeah, this great idea I have, I can build it, or I know about tech and I'll just execute it, and then I go out and try to get this thing and put it somewhere and see who actually buys it, right?
Hmm.
And it's really painful in the sense that you could have saved your time if you would have been talking with people or with the user and actually build something that they are really passionate and excited about to be using. So that's something that we see sometimes with founders that come to us and say, well, I have this, I just need more help maybe with the sales or whatnot. And we're like, yeah, but why did you build that already if you were not in contact with someone to get that feedback? And something as well, when it comes to team dynamics, for example, it's really that alignment into what's the vision, like what's the shared vision, and what are the shared values that a team has. So I wrote about this on LinkedIn just recently, but it's also about, sometimes we get into the excitement of just, entrepreneurship, building a company, let's do something. We think about all the good things, and we get onto that, let's say, working mode and just doing things. But it's really important to have a conversation with your co-founders and say, okay, what's driving you, and what would actually make you stop, even like how far are you willing to go? Because sometimes we all think that we're on the same page and we're going to be doing the same thing, and then some other people, maybe they find a job and they were like, well, we were bootstrapping this thing for quite some months or maybe years, and they just leave. I mean, that actually happened to me once, and then this other founder I spoke with, what they were dealing with was some founders wanted to raise VC funding to keep on scaling. Well, another part of the team were like, we really like it how it is. Like, why should we involve other people now? So all of these things are let's say, challenges that will come. But the sooner you talk about them and discuss them, the better for the long term. You don't want to be in, I don't know, 4 years into a company and then realize that your co-founding teammates wants something maybe different, and it's not aligned with your ambition as well. So those are things that we've seen and that we encourage founders to be open about. And on the product side, well, to be really working together with a user before building or while building.
I really liked what you said about building a product, which also bridged to my last question, to be aware of time, which is not building a product until you have validated that the product that you will sell or position to the end customer is received well. You can better reverse that and save a lot of time. And yeah, going to the end, if you would look at students who have some specific skill set, either technical or more on the business side, they still haven't. Or yeah, that's not is maybe generalization. But when you are at university, you are often looking at theory and you have some very exciting ideas, but perhaps you lack some practical experience as to how things are materializing in the real world between organization. What would your advice be for such students that are like, okay, I have some idea, I want to do something, I do not know really if the entrepreneurship path is something for me, but I want to explore it. What would your advice to be to such students?
I love these questions. Thanks for bringing that up. I think it's really, first of all, talk to people. I mean, find people that maybe inspire you or that have a career that you say, this looks quite interesting. Reach out to them and just say, well, I'm a student. I'm interested in learning more. Just to understand like how these people maybe created their careers. That's something that you're interested in. And if you really, really are interested about entrepreneurship and just what it takes to be a founder or like be part of a founding team, do an internship at a startup. Like if you really want to know what that is and how it feels like to just be figuring things out on the spot and wear multiple hats and do something or create some impact out of let's say out of nothing, even if you wish, join a startup. Just do it on the side of your studies. Figure out a way with the founders. Reach out like, hey, I mean, I have this profile background. I'm just super curious. I'm willing to and eager to learn, and I can bring that energy. And I'm sure many of these founders would appreciate that and that you learn a lot. And then you can decide for yourself from that practical experience, like if that's something you would like to pursue. And there's, of course, other opportunities if you don't want to be jumping right away into a startup to explore, right? There's also incubators, accelerators, venture studios, VCs, where you could be pretty much into the ecosystem and also learn a lot. And if you don't have time or you're not looking into a job or something like this at this point, go to events. There's a lot of networking opportunities. Again, going back to that, talk to people, figure out what they're doing, what they're talking about. Founders are sharing their experiences, there are panel discussions. Just get yourself a bit more immersed in it and try to also find a way to answer those questions that you might have.
Great advice, actions, and I think what is key in what you just said, you have to be proactive. Nothing is coming to you, and don't worry.
100%.
You don't have to be shy. I think also what you said, like entrepreneurs and people, they love to talk about what they are doing because yeah, it's their passion. So
Exactly.
you can definitely ask questions, but you need to go after it yourself, and it's not coming to you. Yeah, having that said, I think was very fun and insightful conversation. Where can people follow what you are doing, Slimmer AI, and learn more about this kind of world?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, I was really, really enjoy it. So you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Daniela Redondo. You'll find me there. You can also find Slimmer on LinkedIn, Slimmer AI. or slimmer.ai. It's also our website, so you can also find more information. Right now, and how we work with founders is via this founder in residence program that I briefly mentioned during the podcast. So if you're curious about that, you can find more information on our website. We also have a Medium post as well. You can also reach out to me. I'm happy to have a chat or conversation if you think this could be something for you. So that sense, super open and eager to get in touch.
Well, thank you very much, Daniela.